no secret. It's plain to see. And I love you. And you love me. It's no secret. You know it's true. You love me. And I love you. The only time we seem to meet is in the middle of the night. Only then can I feel your heartbeat. Till something's not right. Together I see you and me, always and all time. But not everyone would agree. To them it's a crime. It's no secret. It's plain to see. Yes, I love you. And you love me. And it's no secret. You know it's true. You love me. Yes, I love you.
Video's doing it again.
Hi, John. Are you on? Did you accept the invite to video?
Yes, I did. Let me try this again. One more time.
Oh, we
Okay,
lost
I'll do it one more
Luisa.
shot. Okay, hold on. I'm trying to get the video to work here.
No
Let's
problem.
see.
And Luisa, we lost you on video as well.
Can you send maybe the request one more time? I
Sure.
accept it. Yeah,
Sure.
let's
And
try.
then the other thing is, if it doesn't work, you can leave the app and try and rejoin again, Luisa and John. Okay, I see
Okay.
Luisa.
Okay, let me try. I'm not getting a video prompt.
Okay, let me. Victoria, do you want to try and send it just in case for some reason? I'm inviting you to video. John, maybe try exiting the app and we can join
Okay.
again. Maybe that
Let
way.
me try. Okay, let me try.
Hi, Luisa.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How's the sound for you? Everything good?
Good. I think everything's working so far.
Perfect. We'll edit out these beginning bits until we get John on video, so no worries. Oh, you're back. Okay, let me try and invite you again, John. Okay, did you get the invite? I invited you to video. Victoria, do you want to try invite John to video? For some reason, he's not getting my request.
If there's another app open using the camera, then it probably may be taking away the ability for him to use it on the Fireside app.
Yeah, can you send that one more time? Yeah, it's weird. Like it worked in the green room.
Yeah, it worked fine in the green room. Okay, I sent it again. I think
we got it.
Did you get it?
I think we got it.
Oh, we're good. Okay. Okay, fantastic. Okay, we'll edit all this out, John, so no worries.
All right. Cool. Tech. Yay, tech.
Okay, welcome everyone to CryptoDefined. My name is Kathy Chu. I'm a former Wall Street Journal and USA Today reporter. I'm your host for this bi-monthly interview series where we look at the innovators, the disruptors, and the skeptics of the now $1 trillion crypto industry. CryptoDefined is produced by TruthDAO, a new news organization within a DAO. We aim to be nonpartisan, unbiased. You can visit us at truthdao.xyz. Join our Telegram and Discord communities for more information. Today's guests are John Attanasio and Luisa Huang. I hope I didn't butcher your names. The co-founders of Toonstar, a Web3 animation studio. Attanasio and Huang have years of experience in traditional Hollywood, working in movie studios such as Warner Brothers and Disney, and on projects including the Harry Potter series. In the Web3 space, Toonstar is behind an animated NFT series called the Gimmicks that will be launching its second season very soon, probably in the next few days. The Gimmicks is produced in partnership with actress Mila Kunis's Six Wall production studio. It's an irreverent and unapologetically raunchy cartoon that's described as South Park meets WWE about washed up former wrestlers trying to recapture the spotlight. It's written and produced by the duo known as the Daves, which includes a former writer for The Family Guy and The Simpsons. Since everyone in the wrestling world has alter personas, I must mention John's and Luisa's names. John is John Azaboom Attanasio, and Luisa is Luisa, the Wrangler Huang, and that's how you can find them on Twitter. Thank you, John and Luisa, for being here today. This is such a fascinating topic, and I'm so excited to talk to you about it.
Oh, Kathy, thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
I have to tell you this, a funny story before we start. John, you've warned me about the adult content in the gimmicks, the real gimmicks. I knew that, and I was trying to multitask regardless. So I was in a supermarket and I had it on without headphones.
Oh, no.
And I got a few funny looks. So I had to turn it off until I got out to the car. But I guess that's my fault for not listening and to the pre-warning.
That's funny. Okay. Well, the good news is they didn't kick you out of the store, right? So that's like, did they let you finish the transaction? Hopefully.
Well, it was more. I was walking through the store, and all the cursing and the potty language. So I think some of the guests in the supermarket were looking at me like, "What the heck is she watching?" So I was like, "Oh, I'll turn it off." Anyway, we have a lot to talk about, John and Luisa, but I want to talk about Toonstar and the gimmick. But before we start with that, I was hoping to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Both of you have been at traditional Hollywood studios, and you met, in fact, at Warner Brothers, if I remember correctly. So what I wanted to ask you is, and I'd love for both of you to address this briefly, what is broken, if anything, in Hollywood today that needs to be addressed by Web3? why does Web3 need to be a part of Hollywood, if at all? Luisa, do you wanna start, and then we'll have John?
Sorry, I was working on the mute button there. Yeah, so I think, as we sort of look at traditional Hollywood, I think that maybe just sort of like taking a step back, like broken is such like it's such a it's lightning rod term, right? I think that I think that there are a lot of opportunities that I think are really hard to address in like the traditional legacy system. The infrastructure itself has just there's so much entrenched in it, and it's built to address a certain type of production, a certain type of distribution. And I think that, as you look at how consumers are consuming content, and as like the tastes and niches develop, it's just very, very difficult for big studios to be able to address like, hyper specific or even like new and emerging type of like, storytellers, because it's a big bet that is really hard for them to really be able to say, okay, like this is going to be right away, like we drop this massive investment that we're going to be able to see the returns on it in this like big Marvel-esque tentpole sort of like way. And that's what those studios are, really legacy studios are built to be able to kind of do that, is like take something that is already big, has that fan base, and amplify it and make it even bigger. But if you're talking about nurturing the new, nurturing the like the underrepresented, and nurturing new voices, I think it's very difficult in a system like that that's used to being able to say, hey, we really want to, what we want to do is we want to hand over $150 million to make one thing, and that one thing can't fail.
Right. So that's interesting. So content. And John, what about funding and distribution? I was thinking about those issues as it relates to Hollywood. Can Web3 address those issues better, or in some ways more appropriately for smaller filmmakers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question, and to what Luisa said, completely agree, because I think it's part of the root of the problem is this sort of like hits driven business model, which I think which reduces in some ways originality and sort of like new creativity, because you have to. And to her point about Marvel, you're looking at like prequels, sequels, reboots, some sort of like existing IP. Are the things that are getting made now, because that de-risks the projects, because they are, to be fair, super huge bets. And so I think that's exactly the thing, the reason you've limited like new voices. And as far as like, so Web3 could be a solution, I think potentially on the funding side. I think that's still a bit TBD, because there's a little bit of a lack of clarity, specifically from the SEC right now, in terms of like how can the funding be used for projects, and so our belief is like that will eventually get sorted. There will be clarity around that. So I think answer to that is yes, and there are already some projects that have gone down that path that are using Web3 and the blockchain to fund new projects. But I think hopefully we're going to see more clarity around that in the next at least hopefully like six-ish months. And then on the distribution side, that's a really good question, because I think that's something that has not been answered, and I think you're going to see over the next again, call it like six months to a year, probably maybe even call it like, go even farther, like 3 to 5 years, of people trying to figure out distribution in Web3. And I think you're going to see, there's an idea of like, could the next Netflix, the next Hulu, the next, YouTube, be sort of created in Web3. I think there's a possibility with that will come distribution. But right now, you're generally looking at projects that have 5,000, and they're super fans. Like they are hardcore, sort of your biggest fans. But that's not millions of people yet. So the question is, how do you take something that's got 5,000, 10,000 super fans, and then sort of expand that out, get more eyeballs on it, and from there sort of build the world and the characters, and path it to a franchise. Because if you are going to build a franchise, you just you can't do it with 10,000, 20,000. You have to have in the millions of at least kind of like viewers and fans of the property.
Right. And you've both had a really interesting trajectory into crypto. I mean, it seems like actually everyone has their own story about how they got into crypto. But I believe your idea for giving animation fans a way to generate content came from when you were in Hollywood. So talk to me a little bit about that. How did that idea take you into the Web3 space? Did that idea not fit within the traditional Hollywood confines?
Yeah, I mean, you think about traditional Hollywood confines of content. It's not unusual for as creatives and brand owners, they want a very they have very strict controls around what the content is supposed to be and how they want characters to develop. And so the notion of this participatory storytelling where you have the fans and the communities work alongside storytellers to be able to shape a narrative. That definitely is very much unheard of. They're used to traditional storytelling is like a creator has a point of view, has a story arc, has these characters shaped and developed, and studios kind of develop it alongside them. But audiences are really sort of like they're really on a lean back mode. They're there to be presented that information, presented the story, presented the characters, and experience a vision that I think has been crafted by the creator and the studio, but not necessarily invited to really kind of lean in and say, hey, how do you sort of like join the story, and how do you really participate as part of the shaping of that world? So I think that Web3 really opens up that opportunity and opens up that sort of participation and ownership that's really exciting, and that really hasn't been explored in the tradition.
Interesting.
John, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add is that I think there's 100% the participation part, which is a new concept. And I think that's something that traditionally you haven't seen in Hollywood, and I think folks have to just get used to what that means. But I think there's also a change on the production side itself, because if you're thinking about creating communities and worlds and characters where the audience participates, they help shape the narrative. You're going to do things where you might draft on timely topical events, make it very like pop culture, like we do with the Gimmicks. You also have to rethink the production process, which is fundamentally different than how it works now. Like if you look at animation today, traditionally, it can take 2 years to get something made, and that you can't operate like that if you're going to do this like direct to community, participatory story, community, interaction, because the community is going to expect that you're there, at least weekly, sometimes, more than weekly. And you have to be able to move quickly and move with them. So this idea of like, hey, I'm going to create a project and it's going to go into production for 2 years, and at the other end of it, hopefully 2 years later, it's still relevant. And that just does not work, at least in our opinion, in the direct to community space, which now means that you have to rethink the entire development and production process.
Right. And from what I understand, the Gimmicks, it takes about a week, right? Your last season, the episodes dropped on a Friday. You had voting, I saw, until Monday on plot lines, and then by the next Friday, the next episode was out. And the episodes are about 3 to 6 minutes, I believe, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about the Gimmicks. Your series, as we mentioned, it's described as South Park meets the WWE. It's actually written by former wrestlers, voiced by former wrestlers. Talk to me about how the first season did. And specifically, how do you measure the success of this animation, given that it's still in its early days and you're kind of one of the earliest movers in this space? So, how do you define success and how do you measure engagement for the first season?
Yep. So for us, the way we're looking at success, and I think it also starts with what's the goal of the project and what are you trying to sort of build. And for the gimmicks, for us, it was always about number one, participatory storytelling. How do we get the community involved and building, driving the narrative, creating their own characters, they're voicing. We have a number of NFT holders that got to voice their own character as a cameo in an episode. So those are all sort of like forms of co-creation, participatory storytelling. And then the other thing we were very much focused on is utility and like these very unique community experiences, which is why we built this social layer as part of the project, which was driven by this, and I can't make it up, but it's driven by, we call it the Dick Punch. We spelled it a little differently. It's spelled DIC, which is decentralized. It stands for Decentralized Inclusive Community. But that essentially is our version of the Facebook poke, and it's one of the first social layers created in Web3. And again, it's really all about like these unique community experiences, social engagements, social experiences for the community. And so therefore, the way we evaluate the project is engagement of the community and retention of the community, which I would also say are pretty new metrics, because if you're going to look at projects majority of the projects in Web3 right now aren't talking about engagement. They're not talking about retention because the projects just aren't built that way. Majority of the projects were like PFP drops. They're just kind of like their images, which are interesting, but it's a different kind of project than what we're doing. And we're very much like entertainment focused. So therefore engagement, retention are the big metrics. And so then talking about those is like, oh, well, how did you do in those areas? Through the social layer and through the content, we, and again, these are all sort of like new metrics, and there are a few people talking about projects in this way, but we were averaging 70,000 engagements per week from the community. We basically eclipsed 1 million dick punches in 3 months. And all of that was driven off, we have 5,000 token holders. So when you think about, if you apply that to sort of the way that people evaluate engagement and in social media, those are astounding metrics. To have, 5,000 people generate 70,000 actions a week and, generate a 1 million dick punches on chain in 3 months. To us really speaks to, again, the week-to-week engagement that we were getting, but also the retention that we kept, on the project, and the retention in terms of people that just stayed engaged with with whether it was the voting or co-creation or dick punching. So that's.
It's interesting how many times in the series the word dick punches comes up. in one episode.
Right.
5, 6 times.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. So these are very new measures, as you mentioned, but you mentioned, as far as you know, this seems to be very, very engaged community. So part of that engagement, and I'll direct this at Luisa, part of this engagement is that a key part of the series allows NFT holders to determine part of the plot line. And for those who haven't watched the series, hopefully you haven't watched it in a supermarket like I have, but for those who haven't watched the series, some of the decisions that NFT holders have been allowed to vote on include what persona the wrestlers assume and who they wrestle with, right? So my question for both of you, and Luisa, if you want to start, is how do you draw the line between creating good content and versus allowing holders of the NFT to help shape the storyline? Because I can imagine instances where what the audience wants probably is not the best trajectory for the story, and probably not the most, I can imagine if someone told me how to write a story it would be not be the best story. It might be the story they want, but not what is the best for the wider audience. So how do you think about that, Luisa and John?
So I take no credit for this analogy that I'm about to give you. Actually, very recently we did a panel with the Avalanche team, and one of our writers, one of the Daves, David Wright, actually came up with this great analogy, and I very publicly declared that I am taking it and I will be using it forever in order to be able to speak about this subject. And so he talked about, as a writer, this question of like participatory storytelling. Like, how do you balance this concept of like, there is a story to tell, there is a journey in which the characters are taking, in which the plot is going. How do you balance that with allowing the community to be able to lean in and really participate as part of the story without blowing up this entire thing that you're ultimately taking people on a journey through. And so the analogy he gave was like, listen, when you live in LA, you're trying to get to LAX. So people know, like, it's usually very difficult to get to LAX anywhere you live in Los Angeles, because there's a lot of traffic and there's always chaos. And so more often than not, like, everybody who lives in LA has their route and their way of getting to LAX. Some use side streets, some take, this shortcut from the freeway that you get off on this exit and you make these turns. Ways will take you all sorts of different ways. And so that's really the analogy. It's like, listen, we all know the destination where we got to get to LAX. You got to get into that airplane because that's going to take you places. But the way and the route to get to LAX, everybody has a different way. And there's all sorts of, scenic routes you can take. You can take just a purely freeway route in which you probably will sit there for 45 minutes in traffic. But that's really, I'm like, oh, that's a really great way to think about, like, this participatory storytelling, while, allowing writers and storytellers to be able to get you to this destination and get you through this character's journey. It's like, they know, the writers and the creators and the storytellers know that there is a certain journey that we're looking to take you through these characters. But there are a lot of different ways to be able to take that journey. And that's where the participatory storytelling comes in, where it's like, hey, you want to take a side street? Let's go. Let's take a side street. But we know where that journey, like the character's journey, that's the stuff that's like, that's really the thing in which you need that storyteller to help sort of like map and shepherd. But at the same time, it's like, hey, we're game to, like, if you want to take us on a side street and take a detour and take the scenic route, let's go.
And John, you made a good point the last time we talked. It's not like the writers are opening up the entire story. I mean, sometimes I think there have been instances where there's been more creative leeway, but you made a good point that there are certain choices and decisions that the writers will cede kind of creative control, but certain others that they won't, right? So could you talk a little bit about that, John?
Yeah, so we the way we approach it, we kind of put it into two categories. One category we call prompts, and then the other category we call white space. And so the way it works is just how you described it, where on the prompt side, there's more guardrails to it. So for example, the voting. So at the end of each episode, we have a vote to the audience, and they're generally, it's basically multiple choice, and there are three to five options. That they're guardrails around sort of like what can be decided. Now that we call prompts. They still have material impact on the characters and the narrative, because I mean, there were some choices, like one of the choices was, seemingly sort of, sort of seemingly innocuous choice of like, oh, what's Enzo's costume? What's his gimmick going to be? Which actually, once it was decided, came into play down the road and actually impacted the narrative in at least, I think, like 2 or 3 episodes. So, but those are sort of these prompts, and there's certain kind of this arc of, I would call it like an arc of implications that will happen from those decisions. And then And so that's sort of like one kind of like form of like, participation. The other is the white space. The white space, an example of that is the wikis. So what we did is that we created a wiki setup so that every NFT holder could go and create a backstory for their own NFT. They could create lore. I mean, and some of them were very elaborate. Like it was almost like you see that mind map in Sherlock Holmes with the strings, and this person's tied to the other person. So we had several characters created that had that sort of like lineage and sort of backstory to them. So that's a white space area where you just go and create. And who's this character? What's their personality? What who are they related to? What is their sort of origin story? And then based on that, there was another vote that took place, and the most popular wiki stories, then those token holders got to voice their character as a cameo in an episode, which is a whole nother thing, because like whenever you see somebody hear their voice as a cartoon character, universally they flip out. It's like one of the coolest things to see, because it never gets old. But that's what people got to do. And so that is like kind of like much more white space, where it's like, we're going to let you go create. And the other part of the white space we're doing is that, one of these sort of character backstories, we're going to do a spin-off series about. So now all of a sudden it's like you've gone down the white space path, and you can create a spin-off or a character that potentially can become part of the canon of the Gimmicks world. And so those are kind of generally the two categories of we'll call like co-creation or like participation that we've been using.
So I have to ask you, was there any instance, Luisa and John, where a decision was made by the audience that you felt like it should have gone the other way, in terms of, because I would assume that the writers have to kind of write with such a tight deadline of a week, they kind of have to write a little bit of each storyline and to know where it's going. So, and you would know that as well. So was there any instance where the audience and the NFT holders had picked a choice that you felt like, oh, that would have been better if you picked one of the other choices?
I think there was definitely some. I think one of the instances was around who the kayfabe crew was going to go pitch to, like from a venture capital. Like they were going to search for money for their promotion, and then there were some choices around like, okay, well, who do you go pitch to? And the result ended up being that.
Wasn't one of the choices a bake sale, or was that just a storyline?
It was the bake sale came before who they were going to pitch, the venture capital, and they ended up choosing like Dusty the dog.
Oh,
and
right.
So that was definitely not one that like the writers and the producing group was like thinking that's what's going to happen. And so it was a little bit of like, oh, okay, they're going to, like, this dog was going to be a venture capitalist, and they were going to have to figure out like, well, so how do you pitch a dog? Like, what does a dog VC look like, and what kind of a place would he be in? So that one definitely was a bit of like a creative exercise of like, okay, now we're going to reimagine. That was an option that was absolutely sort of like, ha ha ha, just for fun. Let's put that as an option. Never thought that was going to be, chosen, and it was. And so that was definitely one that took a little bit of like extra sort of like spin, and then also just from a creative standpoint of like, okay, now you're talking about creating we had to create like a dog club, like a Soho house for dogs, and they were like hanging out. It was like a whole like thing. And so but it actually turned out to be really funny, and they had a lot of fun actually, creating around that.
Right. And it sounds like it's like the choose your own adventure books, but applied to a cartoon. Those books we used to read when we were young. So the Gimmicks also highlights Latina talent. And I know Riverdale actor Mark Consuelos is joining as an executive producer for the second season, and voice talent. So talk to me a little bit about Latinas and Crypto. Is there a lack of representation in the crypto space or in Hollywood or in both areas that you're trying to address here?
Yeah, so I think, in the content, I don't think it's a secret that, diversity has been an ongoing issue in Hollywood for a while. And most recently, I think there's a UCLA study that was published around diversity in Hollywood. And, Latinos actually are one of the most underrepresented, groups in Hollywood. And it's surprising because you look at the makeup of the country, like 20+% you have 20+% Latinos in the country. And yet from a representation in media and in content standpoint, they're just severely underrepresented. And so that is definitely something that, we see Web3 as being able to, open up the space and open up to storytellers to be able to create in front of the camera, behind the camera, so to speak, animation. So as voice talent, as producers, as writers. And so when we look at this new season of the Gimmicks that is launching tomorrow, it's the House of Chico. So Chico is one of the main characters that is from the kayfabe group from season 1, and he actually was one of the breakout characters. People really loved his heart, and they loved what he stood for and what he represented as a character. And so we wanted to take that and further explore Chico's background and his family and his lucha sort of like lore. And we also saw this as a great opportunity to be able to take this and say, how do we think about, we wanted to create and produce something that is really gives the it's like folks, Latino storytellers in this space to be able to lean in and say, okay, well then what does the lucha world look like? The family dynamics of a Mexican family look like? The story of like a child returning home after not being able to like make it in the world. What does that look like? But from a very like Latino standpoint. So we're taking very universal themes, right? And really tackling through the lens of the Latino storyteller and the Latino culture. And the hope is that, and what we want to demonstrate and what we want to show is that, you can tell stories from a very, like specific, culture, but at the same time have this like universal appeal. And that's really kind of what we're trying to drive with the House of Chico.
Okay, so your series was inspired partly by Stoner Cats, I believe, an animation series backed by Mila Kunis and her studio. I believe with Stoner Cats, if I remember correctly, the NFTs cost about $800, but with the Gimmicks, the NFTs were free to mint. So can you talk to me, John, a little bit about the business model behind the Gimmicks and why you chose not to charge for NFTs versus, having, I don't know, 500, 800 for NFTs if the market would bear. We're in a bear market. So talk to me about the business model.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, so that strategy, I think for us was it started with how we designed the project and how we designed the Gimmicks going in is that we really wanted to create a world and like a world and characters that was accessible to everybody. So what we wanted to do was like, clearly welcome the degens and the sort of the, everybody that, the very crypto savvy, but we also wanted to invite all the normies, newbies, whatever term is being used, but folks that are new to crypto or don't even know what crypto is and the blockchain, because for us, like if you're gonna build a world that has a lot of potential to grow, for us, you want to bring in as many sort of like people that want to play and have fun and dig the story as possible. And so from the beginning, it was like really for us, it's like all about accessibility, inclusion. We use the term over and over again, but it is it is on theme, the dick punch, because it does stand for the I is inclusive, and we wanted to make this project as accessible and inclusive as possible to everybody, so that we can bring people in, because to the category, because our sort of part of our thesis is that entertainment hopefully will be one of the things that will take Web3 mainstream and will help drive mass adoption. But we got a ways to go to get this to be mainstream, and so therefore you don't want then it's like, okay, let's reduce as many barriers as we can. So that kind of like goal and that basically filtered into everything we did. Our entire strategy was like launch strategy was driven by that. So then how it translates to the implementation is like, okay, yeah, it makes sense. Let's make it free. So you don't have to pay a high price to come in and have fun and just like learn about Web3 and this whole notion of like participatory storytelling and co-creation and social layer on chain. So let's make it free. Also, let's do it in a place where it doesn't have high gas fees, because when you think about engagement and think of all the actions that we had weekly or still have weekly on chain, if you have high gas fees, you're not going to, that's going to be a barrier to that level of engagement. So we wanted to go somewhere where we had low gas fees. We also wanted to go somewhere where the on-ramp, the user on-ramp was very intuitive, very easy, was not intimidating. So that's another, thing that we factored in. And then we wanted to, there's a green component too. So we wanted to go to a chain that was like super green. But all of that is like this goal of like, let's make it accessible. Let's welcome as many people as we can. And let's like help educate what Web3 is, what it can be, and reduce as many barriers as possible. So that was pretty much what drove our approach.
Is the NFT, the bear market in NFTs and in crypto, and actually there's a bear market everywhere, right? Globally,
Right.
Did the bear market in NFTs affect that decision at all and make you think, okay, this is not a good time to charge money for NFTs?
Yeah, so I think when we launched the gimmicks, this was well before crypto winter. So definitely that was not that really wasn't a consideration of like, oh well, what is the market sort of like bearing? I think it really just kind of came down to, we do believe that because we wanted to appeal to that different user base, like we really believe that in order to kind of like build IP and build story and franchise, you have to appeal to more than just sort of like the very very avid degen collectors, and that requires the willingness to be able to attract people who really haven't been in the space. It's a bit of sampling, so to speak, right? You have something that's completely new, you have a product that's completely new, and you're asking people to download a wallet. You're asking people to, learn how to get on chain, asking people to learn what a dick punch is. I mean, there's a lot of hurdles to be and a lot of learning to do. And so that on top of like then the idea of like, well, you want them to pay to learn and do all of this experimentation. It just felt like it was a lot to ask. And, we're, as a company and as kind of creators in this space, we're in it. I know it sounds so cliche, but we're in it for the long haul. Like, we're not here to just be like, hey, we're going to launch a project and we're launch a collection. We want it to moon. And, that's it. Like, we believe in the longevity of the space. We believe that there is, truly something to build here. And so, to launch something and say, cool, I'm gonna like charge a bunch of money and hopefully like it's gonna moon and like that's it. That's really not long term, and it's not something that it's not
Right. And so what's interesting is on the secondary market, obviously you can buy some of these characters. And I was looking on OpenSea, they're selling from anywhere from a few dollars to a few $1,000s, depending on which one. So how do you expect to monetize the content though? Because I think that's the million-dollar question for a lot of people entering the Web3 space. It's so Web3 allows you to create content and to cut out the middleman in a lot of ways, but there's still the question, the big question of how do you make money off it? So how does Toonstar think about this picture?
Yeah, so we see Web3 and content in Web3. It's content monetization. It's an ecosystem, right? There's like a whole stream. There's like a whole revenue stream. Like if you just talk to like any sort of like content maker and you just broach the subject of like monetization to them, and it all becomes like well, how do what are the layers of monetization in which they're activating? It's really no different in Web3. It's like you have this content in which you've created, and so there's licensing revenue streams that you would try to sort of like be able to get. You try to do merchandising. You would try to do any sort of like ad driven type of model. So all of those like particular business models are still very much in place. So I don't think that there is this idea of like Web3 is going to come in and we're just going to completely revolutionize top to bottom this like full sort of like economy that's been driven around content. I think this is like this is going to be part of the ecosystem of content. Like we don't believe that at the end of the day, like the traditional distribution models are not going to go away. But we believe that Web3 is going to be part of that, idea and solution to bringing content into the ecosystem. Because, you take a look at a show like the Gimmicks, and you have this like avid fan base. And what they've proved out for us is that this content works and there is affinity. And so the question is like, then what happens, like how do you then, move up the distribution scale? And that also serves as a proof point to say, folks on the more traditional distribution side is like, oh, is there an audience? Like what kind of an audience is there? Is there affinity to it? How do they behave? We can answer all of those questions with our community and with the behavior that's taking place. So, as it pertains to monetization, we believe that it's going to be a lot of different types of monetization streams, but it's going to Web3 is going to be a part of it through either like potentially monetize NFT sales, but there's going to be other types of like events. There's going to then be the regular distribution model of you're going to be able to license the content, you're going to be able to do merch, you're going to be able to do all of those things. But I think the difference is that whereas before, as creators and as content as storytellers, in the traditional model of like if you sell your story, like then you're done. You sell the story, you sell the rights to it, and they produce it. And that's maybe if you're like really really kind of like a big talent, big name, you'll be able to negotiate some smaller backend, although those are very very like few and far between. But like in Web3, you sort of like build it, you have your proof of concept, and you own the rights to that particular property and the content until you're ready to monetize it in the licensing structure, and you have a little bit more sort of like stake and control over what you want.
Okay, thanks for that, Luisa. Very interesting. So John, what do you see as the next step for Toonstar? And what do you see as your biggest challenge, whether for Toonstar or for the Gimmicks, and kind of making this model of animation that we're talking about, this community participatory model of animation mainstream?
Yeah, I mean, so what's next is, we're super excited about the Gimmicks world that we've built. We've got the second season, which these are all, as far as we're aware, like these are first in the Web3 space. Is like this is now the first Web3 series to get this like a second season launched. And so to us, like that, we're launching the second season of the Gimmicks. We're gonna continue to lean into that community because it's we love the community. They are beyond committed to the project, and helping the project like grow and evolve. So we're going to continue to help drive this world, and I think you're going to see I think you're going to see new partnerships on the horizon that will help drive reach for the gimmicks, and then also and exactly the two questions you asked, like how do you think about distribution, which is reach, and then how do you think about revenue monetization. And so I think you're going to see us announce some partnerships that will help drive both the reach and monetization for the gimmicks. And then we've got other projects in the pipeline that we're going to be launching. So we're using the gimmicks as sort of our blueprint for what has worked. And certainly the things that we'll learn from what worked, and tweak the things that didn't, and do more of the things that did, hopefully. But we are going to use this as our blueprint, because we do think that the gimmicks hopefully is kind of a case study for the potential of Web3, and what this idea of we're calling it like Hollywood 3.0, but essentially like the future of Web3 entertainment can look like. So we've got more projects on the horizon with other great well-known creators. Some come from the traditional side, some come from what you call like the Web 2.0 side. And I think we're in a unique position where we can sort of be a bridge to both those worlds. And you saw it with the gimmicks, where there's traditional Hollywood we work with, bridging them to Web3. The first season, and then with House of Chico, I think you see how we can also be a bridge from Web 2, because House of Chico features a lot of well-known Latino influencers. So we're helping creators like that bridge them into Web 3. So I think you're going to see more projects like that from us in the future. So that's kind of what's ahead. Sorry, that was a long answer. But as far as the challenges, I think the challenges are sort of like exactly what you said. It's like how do you take these projects, and how do you sort of build out reach, get more people involved, make it accessible. I think education is a big challenge. I just think for the category in general, because I think there are a number of people that just don't understand what Web3 is. They're maybe a little fearful to get into it. So I think education is needed. That's a challenge. Also, I think and to be honest, there are bad actors. Like, there are bad actors out there. It is the Wild West, and there are projects, there are rug pulls. They're just you do have to they say do your whatever DYR, do your research. But you have to, because it is Wild West, and there's some bad things happening. So hopefully that stuff gets sort of like falls by the wayside, because and I think hopefully this is what crypto winter will do. This hopefully is a positive byproduct of that, is that this is going to sort of like weed out folks that have projects that aren't legit. But I think that's definitely a challenge for us, but also for the entire industry.
Okay, so a few more quick questions. I think you answered this before, but I just wanted to clarify. So I noticed that you moved from Solana to Avalanche. And is that because of the gas fees and driving engagement you wanted? Was that the determination for moving to Avalanche, the gas fees?
So, I mean, there were it was a lot of soul searching and really thinking about, making that move. And really, both chains actually, from a gas and eco standpoint, both really are strong in terms of like having low gas fees, and then also in being very eco-friendly. For us, kind of what we were looking for, and as we sort of like continued building in this space, is we were looking for partners that are just, had all of that. And then plus, like when we started talking to the Avalanche group, One of the striking things about what felt a bit different about like the Avalanche, and we use the word community. Like community is such like a core tenet for the Gimmicks project, and then for what we believe is hugely important in Web3. It really the Avalanche community really impressed us. The builders, the other builders who were there, the collaboration that was happening in the way that they were building together, that really just stood out to us as like being on the Avalanche chain meant more than just like building on the Avalanche blockchain. It meant being part of this developer community. And when we went to a couple of their like community or developer oriented like activities, and we just really got to feel and talk to other developers and got to see like in action how they were collaborating, what they were building together. And it was really just like it was like everything that we saw in the Gimmicks, but then just at a blockchain level. And that was really hugely important for us. And we just felt like what we are looking to do next level with the Gimmicks and what we wanted to build, that community was going to be important and helpful.
Okay. So as we know, Hollywood's slowly creeping into Web3. We've seen Fox Entertainment invested $100 million to launch its own NFT focused studio, Blockchain Creative Labs, I think the name is. Directors like Roman Coppola and Steven Soderbergh have launched decentralized pictures, which is very interesting, using blockchain technology to vote on and distribute content. So I just wanted to ask you both briefly, whoever wants to answer this question, do you think it'll be another year, 5 years, 10 years before Hollywood is immersed in Web3? I mean, is this like a kind of a steamroller at this point, or is this kind of a slow burn coming? How quickly do you think this will happen?
Yeah. Who's going first? Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think I can't put a number on it because I don't like, and this is like, and I'll give you like a little bit of context too from where like Luis and I come from. Like we come from we met at Warner, and Luis was at Disney and I was at DreamWorks. So we come from the studio system. And we do, we met in a group that was the innovation, like, it was the innovation group. So we were like digital media and like driving sort of like innovation at the studio. And we sort of, experienced firsthand how hard it is to, drive and sort of move, again, to be fair, giant operation, a lot of people, a lot of moving parts, a lot of, a lot of agendas, and that's difficult. Like that's very, very difficult to do. And so I think part of that is, and the reason I bring that up is I think part of that will, might slow the going head first from everybody. But I do think that's coming. I definitely think it's coming. I think you're gonna, to your point, Fox and some other folks are investing in this space. I think as there's more, sort of like clarity around how the space works, to your point, like, the reach, how distribution sort of shapes out, how monetization shapes out. I think those will be sort of triggers to more folks jumping in. But I'd also say, I think that the thing that has to be thought through is that you can't, and again, this is, my opinion, I think probably Luisa shares it, taking, if the approach from, a big studio is going to be, hey, I'm taking existing IP and I'm going to slap a Web3 label on it, our opinion is it's not going to work. Because, the communities, the folks in the space, very, very savvy, very smart. And I just don't think that's going to be super well received if you just slap a label on it. But if, and that's not to say you can't take, legacy existing IP, But if you're going to bring it into the space, our belief is that you have to do it in a very sort of organic, native, true way to the community and sort of what stage that, Web3 is in right now. But I do think that will happen. You're going to see more people. I think crypto winter probably has put a bit of a delay on it, because everyone, again, between the SEC regulation, what's gonna sort of come out of that, and then also crypto winter. I think you've seen maybe some folks put a bit of a pause, but again, I think we'll see sort of the industry emerge from the winter in in a year, maybe less, and you definitely will see. I think more people kind of jump in.
Okay, and last but not least, Luisa, do you want to give us a 1-minute preview of what season 2 of the Gimmicks will be like? For John, any preview you want to give us for what season 2 of the Gimmicks will be like?
Yeah. So, season 2, as we mentioned, is going to focus on the House of Chico, and it's really a bit of mystery of like what there's a sort of like a villainous force that is taking over Chico's family, and Chico's gone home to really kind of discover that their family and their sort of family's legacy is at stake and is at risk, and he's really gone back home to really save the family in a way and to preserve the legacy of the lucha promotion. And that's really kind of the focus is really all around like his family, the family dynamics, and what it means to what legacy means to that family and to really his life. So we're super excited. It's gonna be really, really funny, as irreverent. But I think you'll find that in this particular season that there's a bit of a more balance of the humor and heart, because Chico is a bit of a more of a softie in terms of the character, and so we're really kind of feel like Gimmicks, where the original Gimmicks season 1 was that like South Park meets WWE. Maybe this is kind of like moving toward a bit of like a softer PG-13 level of humor that I think you could sit around with the whole family to like enjoy.
Okay, will be very interesting to watch what the NFT holders do in terms of like shaping the direction. Okay, that's it for today's edition of CryptoDefined. Check out truthdown.news in the next few days for a written recap of John Attanasio's and Luisa Huang's interview with TruthDAO. Thank you so much, guys. Very, very nice having you and very interesting stuff.